Hello, everyone. This is Carter Wetzel. I'm your host today with Shade Protocol and Into the Interchain. Today we have a very special guest. We have Jake. Without further ado, Jake, what is your background in Web3 and what is the project that you're representing today?
Awesome. Yeah. So my name is Jake Kane. I work at Axelar Network. Um, I've been here since about January when we went live on mainnet. Previously, before being in the Web3 space and getting into this, I was selling into financial services at Salesforce and just had like a more traditional Web2 tech background. But just kind of like fell in love with the concept of blockchains and could see how it would be impactful for a lot of the companies that I was working with back then. So decided to make the leap. Now there's no looking back.
No looking back. And tell us about Axelar. What, like, fundamentally, what is the problem that Axelar is trying to solve? And give us a history of how the project really came together, how the builders came together, and what the progress has looked like to date.
Yeah, for sure. So I mean, I think from the highest level, right? Blockchains can't talk to each other. So it would be like if you have applications that are built on like Microsoft can't talk to an application built on Salesforce or Amazon or anything else in the Web2 space, which is clearly a large problem. So Axelar is essentially a blockchain that connects blockchains that allows you to send messages to or from any blockchain that we're connected to within our network. If you look at the interoperability space to date, it's probably the sketchiest part of blockchains in general, right? Like there's been almost $2 billion of hacks this year. The latest Binance one was like $500 million. It's been a crazy year. But most of the time, you read headlines about something happening in the blockchain space, like it's because of a bridge getting hacked. And the reason why bridges get hacked is because you essentially have a centralized entity that is connecting to decentralized entities. And from an attack vector standpoint, right, like that's where kind of a malicious actor is going to look, because there's just like so many funds that you're able to grab. And that's where Axelar really goes about it in a completely different way. And that's why we are a blockchain, right? So we're essentially validating things on both sides and then moving them around. But we are secured by 2/3 consensus of a fully permissionless, decentralized set of validators, much like, secret network. So like from a high level, that's our architecture, our story. Our co-founders, Sergey and Yorgos, actually were two of the three founding team members of Algorand, working really closely with Silvio Micali. So that protocol started as a research project out of MIT. Then they brought it to life. And while they were there, they noticed all of these, really great teams going out and building these other layer ones. They saw, the Cosmos ecosystem, and everybody that was building a protocol on Algorand wanted liquidity from these other networks, right? So because of like both aspects of that, it was just kind of obvious that we weren't looking at like a single blockchain world, and like Algorand is doing what it's doing. So they decided to break off and try to solve this interoperability problem. And so it's really all we're focused on is building out the most secure possible interoperability infrastructure. Like we don't focus on bringing our own applications to market or anything like that, because it's just like such a big problem to solve. And then like you can always be adding like more interesting security features that essentially make like this aspect of the blockchain world less attractive to go and attack, right? So we have like rate limits on a blockchain level that we just implemented. We have rate limits on an asset level that protocols are able to implement, right? So it's just like, however long it's going to take somebody to go and like attack a blockchain, you just want to make it like not worth their time. So as long as we can keep on like capping that and making it less attractive, I think we're going to be in a really good position.
Fascinating.
Moving forward.
So when I look at a lot of the bridge hacks that have happened in the last year or two, I really break it down into two categories. There is the custodianship component that gets violated, as in someone's able to maintain a majority of consensus on some multi-sig, and they're able to, remove funds, send funds. And the other side of it has had to do with kind of the communication protocol itself. Like, I'm going to create a fraudulent proof tied to that I own these assets, and because the communication protocol is accidentally built in such a way, I'm totally within the bounds of the code able to move these assets. I think previously, when we look back on the last 3 years, the custodianship attack is for sure the most common, but I think the communication protocol layer attack could become more common, as we saw that's what happened with Binance in essence. So walk us through with Axelar, specifically, how does the architecture protect against that 51% attack for our viewers that maybe aren't super ingrained into the concept of proof of stake chains, and kind of walk me through how consensus is tied to custodianship. And then once we've walked through that topic, walk me through kind of the communication protocol that Axelar is using. How is it kind of differentiated? Because I know it's agnostic, and like walk us through those unique properties and kind of the security around that component of the protocol.
Sure. So from when we think about coming to consensus, right? So like we have a permissionless decentralized set of validators. So like right now there's 50, but that was capped because our token launch was a couple weeks ago. So now we're going to be expanding that to like any other Cosmos chain, which typically gets up somewhere between like 100 and 150. So essentially you have, this network of computers that, needs to, 2/3 of them need to say like, this is right before something gets added to a block. And all of those validators are all over the country, all over the world, running their own software, and just like having a diverse validator set makes it really difficult to go and like actually attack that are all running different programs and different softwares to do their validation. And so we also there is this kind of risk of, whales getting a certain amount of stake, and then you're able to, with governance votes and anything like that, have a majority of stake, and then you're able to, kind of swing their protocol in various directions. So we actually just implemented quadratic voting. So each of the votes are essentially a square root of it. So it more normalizes the distribution of the votes, which I think is pretty important. And that's really just having decentralization leads to security, right? Like when we look at blockchains, we don't typically see blockchains getting hacked. And I think a big key with Axelar is simplicity, right? Originally when people sometimes have a hard time understanding, they're like, okay, I don't get it. Why is this more secure? And it's well, blockchains don't get hacked really. And having this a proof of stake network is kind of a battle tested way to run a decentralized protocol, and I think there are so many people that are experts in distributed systems and thinking about this, and so far it just works, and it's nice, it's clean, it's nice, clean, and simple. And I think that we've kind of seen time and time again, when you overcomplicate stuff, it leaves more room for error, and it's really not good. So I like that aspect of it. In terms of how we actually operate internally, same kind of motto, right? I think that one of the reasons why Nomad actually was hacked, even though that was kind of a JV smart contract error, right? They just missed something, but it was our folks looked at that and they were this is way overdone and overcomplicated. And when you have super overcomplicated systems, there's more room for errors like that, right? So really the way that we work is we have gateway contracts set up on each of the chains, and we're moving assets and information around, and we're validating them on both sides with our network. So if Ethereum validated something, then we know that to be true, then Axelar will validate it as it moves over. And then if that's true, then it's true over here, because we're just using the same model to pass information back and forth.
So it's
I think
sequential.
simplicity.
It's kind of a sequential series of, it happens over here. This state's been confirmed on Ethereum. We obviously have to trust Ethereum state is true. And now we're going to update our state to reflect the change in Ethereum state. And this person gave a message that now they've given us permission, once that's been confirmed, to be sent to this other chain, in essence.
Yeah, exactly. And like outside of that, I think so. Simplicity, like rigorous audits and security policies, and just a sharp team that's like solely focused on this one thing, right? Just kind of like eye on the prize, and we do like bug audits, and we have all of kind of like the traditional methods, but I think like just keeping it simple is a big one.
100%. Maybe walk us through how much success has Axelar seen to date in terms of asset traffic, and what does it look like? How receptive have users been to Axelar as a product, especially in this era of like, do I trust a bridge? So like kind of walk us through your users, how excited they've been to use the bridge, and maybe some metrics and signals that people are using Axelar.
Sure. So if it would let me share my screen, I could have showed you this. But if you go to axelarscan.io, you can see our block explorer. Something kind of unique to Axelar actually being a blockchain, so I don't think most interoperability protocols will be able to show you something like this. But we have about 1.5 billion TVL that's kind of moved through the network so far. And we're connected to 27 chains at this point. So we connect to all of the Cosmos chains through just IBC channels. And then like the next big chains that we're doing before the end of the year, like Optimism, Arbitrum, we'll go live with Sui or whatever you say. When that goes live in Aptos, and we'll probably get to Solana in Q1, and then hopefully by the end of Q1, but probably like closer to the end of Q2, where actually like the network is going to be permissionless, so you can actually just add blockchains yourself.
Wow.
I'm pretty excited about that. It's just kind of
1.5 billion, 27 networks. How long have you guys been live on mainnet?
Since January, I believe.
Wow, I mean that's impressive for less than a year. That is some impressive progress. I guess to kind of close things out with like 3 questions, just to kind of give you context where we're at this point. I'm really curious about the role of Axelar as it pertains to like the world of centralized finance and connecting it to DeFi. Because one of the really interesting parts about Axelar is it kind of has this agnostic API that anyone can kind of talk to and communicate with from their respective blockchain. So has there been any interest from like institutions? Is that at all a part of Axelar's strategy at some point, is to be like a communication protocol, not just from like decentralized blockchains, but potentially smaller permission blockchains or other centralized entities?
It's a good question, and I've like thought about this like kind of a lot lately. I don't even know why. I just think it's interesting. Like if you think about a messaging protocol, it's kind of like MuleSoft or like an API,
Yep.
Jitterbit, whatever, right? You're sending information back and forth. Like we can execute functions on different chains. But the interesting thing about how we do it is like it's decentralized, right? So if you have a centralized entity and you don't really care about decentralization, like I don't understand why you wouldn't just use an API. And like build something in with like a more traditional messaging protocol, right? But like, and I don't know what the cost would be like for like us versus something like that, right? Because then that's the only other reason why you go our route, because it's cheaper,
Right.
So like I think most of the centralized exchanges have like NFT marketplaces or like a decentralized wallet or something like that, and we're definitely in conversations with them. And like hypothetically, I guess, well, not even hypothetically, like we're starting to realize that there's a lot of use cases of just like wrapping tokens, making them ERC20 compatible, and then like listing them on centralized exchanges. So I think that is another like interesting use case that we've started to notice. But I mean, I guess time will tell. Like, to me, I don't like really get it of why a centralized exchange would want to use us outside of just like being able to list
Sure.
like any asset they want. But who knows?
Who knows? Yeah, I mean, the way I think about it is, you guys have built the rails. If the rails prove to be safe and there's a lot of traffic and a lot of assets on it, it could just be for, once again, like that simplicity component of like it's secure and it's simple, like that, and that's a very powerful tool to use, even if it's, I guess performance is a different question. So my second to last question is, walk me through like the biggest problem the bridge faces to date outside of security. I'm assuming it has to do with kind of the user story of like, how do you make that bridging UI UX as frictionless as possible, and how do we make it easy for projects to plug into Axelar? So walk us through the biggest friction points that Axelar faces today, and how do they plan to solve that?
Yeah, so I think like if you go and like use Satellite, for example, and you come over into Cosmos, right? And you're coming from Ethereum. I guess there are like legitimately so many like horrible UI. Like DeFi sucks right now.
Yeah.
So there's so much that needs to be done, and I think that having messaging protocols is actually, it's going to take some time to like build out all of the core pieces of infrastructure. But like this is key to UI enhancement, right? So like one of the problems is time. So if you're moving something over on Satellite, and Satellite is like an intermediary step, right? Like we don't want Satellite to be around in 2 years. We want you just to have a one-click experience on the front end of your application. Like we are trying to remove steps and remove friction from the process. So time is huge. Like it takes too long to move from Ethereum. So we have a new feature that we're rolling out called the full callable feature, which allows you to wait for like 1, 2, 3 validations on the Ethereum network. Then we have a service that essentially goes and grabs that message, moves it over, and like deposits your funds. Can do that almost instantaneously, and then they'll finalize the transaction on the back end. And whatever the risk, like it's very easy to calculate the risk in that scenario, right?
Sure.
You're like, okay, if you have 1 validation, like what is the likelihood that this is going to be right? If you have 3, what is the likelihood that this is going to be right? And you can just, charge a very small fee for like saving 15 minutes of time. I don't think anybody's going to think twice about that.
Right.
And we might just bake that in. I don't know. We'll see what happens. There's definitely demand for that. Another thing is like, if we think about just the complexity of like, where do these liquidity pools live? Like if I'm over on Avalanche and I want to get into Osmosis, like the Osmosis version of AXL USDC is one canonical version.
Yes.
Which has proved to be like the move, because like so many of these other, like you just have liquidity fragmentation, right? And having canonical versions of assets has, you have way deeper liquidity. You have it's just, everything is easier.
Yep.
So that was like kind of a cool experiment that we were able to kind of test out with the Osmosis team. But then if we think about coming over from like Avalanche or Polygon or like any of these other networks, right? Like there's bridging involved, there's swapping involved. Like how do we figure out like what the right path is? Like you're literally watching YouTube videos, or like reading, Twitter threads, or like who knows, but it's not like, I don't even think you can go to like Google and be like, what's the best path to get like this into that?
It's such
app?
a power
like,
user
from over here.
It's such a power user thing at this point. It's like, how do we simplify that entire journey where users don't have to be Google search experts that are willing to take a leap of faith on some tutorial that they saw? Like they should be able to go to something like Axelar, see all their possible paths, and feel safe and feel good about it,
Well, yeah, so that's what Squid is doing, right? Like, we don't even want them to see their paths. Like, I don't want you to have to make a decision. We're just going to do what's best for you.
Right.
Right. And then, like, enable that in one click. So, like, depending on where you start and where you're trying to end, like, Squid enables you to just do cross chain swaps. And there's like 4 things that are happening in the back end, whether it's like bridging, like, liquidity pools in curves, doing swaps on dexes. But the point is, like, you're able to just abstract that completely away from the user. And, that it's just like so much more welcoming, right? Like, crypto is like a horribly unwelcoming word. Like, when we can get like these Cosmos projects and all these projects that once people get into DeFi, they're like, oh, like, this doesn't suck. It's not super confusing. I think it's going to be much stickier as we move forward, which is great.
Completely agree. Well, Jake, I'll kind of open the floor to you for what kind of the final question. Where do you see Axelar in 2023? And once you've walked us through that, I'll just give you the chance to look into the camera, talk to your community or anyone listening to this video. Feel free to say anything you'd like there, and then we'll close things out.
So I think that we're just going to keep on adding more chains, right? Like, and I think by the end of 2023, like, as we start getting more of these like core infrastructure providers that are building on us, like Squid or like Kato, right? Like, doing the fiat on ramps, and Squid's doing the cross-chain swaps. And we have like the generate deposit address SDK, which enables you to, make a deposit address on your DApp and then plug that right into the centralized exchange, and send your funds that way. So, like, just making onboarding like significantly easier across the board for everybody. And then just working with like wallet providers and different applications to just like fix all of the UI problems that like we're getting in front of, right? Like, if you think about people, a bunch of users are going to start coming over to Cosmos from Ethereum, and they're going to think like, oh, these are just applications. Like, they're not different blockchains, but they're all different blockchains, and you need to be toggling back and forth. And like, there's path dependency with IBC. So like, you can't take Axelar USDC from Osmosis and bring it over to Say and then like push it into Kujira. Like, it's the wrong version. So we're just doing a lot of thinking about like, how do we get in front of these problems and solve them before like they're really problems.
When Axelar wallet?
So I don't like, there are rumors that we're going to enable some smart contracts on the network to just like allow people to build things for the network, but we don't want people building application full, like, if we enabled smart contracts like full throttle, somebody would just come and like make a DAX on Axelar, and then we'd be competing with all of our projects that we work with, and like, that's not what we're trying to do here at all. So like, I do think there will be some cooler things that are going to be able to get like built out on top of the network, but next year is all about just like maintaining high security. I think like adding more security features like these rate limits is going to be awesome. And keep adding chains. And then like, I'm super excited about the permissionless chain onboarding. Like, that's just super cool. But I hope, by the end of 2023, like, DeFi and just like all of these applications will be a lot more welcoming. And it's another just like kind of crazy thought is like, your wallet's gonna like essentially become your inbox, right?
Yeah.
Like, we can now send messages. Like, companies are going to be able to send messages based off of like what you've done on chain.
Yep.
And it's going to kind of turn into like your email inbox, which I think is going to potentially get like super, super spammy.
I was going to say, you're a Uniswap whale. Come bring your liquidity here. Traditional marketing.
Right. And people, I mean, I think that's going to get super interesting too, because people are going to be like, okay, what's my customer acquisition cost? Like, is it worth it if I'm DYDX and I want to go like steal people from this other perps protocol? Like, what makes sense for our business? Should I give them like $150 to do that? And does that make sense for our business? So I think we're going to start seeing a lot more of that, which is, I don't know. I mean, it'll be cool to watch it go down. Yeah.
100%. Well, thank you, Jake, for kind of walking us through Axelar today. Kind of want to open the floor to you to look into the camera and talk to your community or anyone watching this. But anything you'd like to close with and tell us about?
I think like in general, right, we have some really cool like builders programs that people can get involved with. Like we're doing a grants program right now and running an accelerator program. But for anybody that's building, like, feel free to reach out to us. You have like kind of full access to the team. And I think if you're, building something new right now, you should definitely be thinking about like, how do we make this cross chain? Because essentially, like, you just have global access to liquidity. Like I see a lot of the new applications that are coming out right now are just going to be able to tee up these experiences where like you're not just getting the best yields from this chain, you're able to get the best yields from all of the chains and then give them to your customers in like one clean interface. So I just see like these are the applications that are going to win. And there's like really cool, interesting use cases with like Secret and with Shade, right? Like doing cross-chain lending and borrowing where you're like taking a loan out on an asset that's on Ethereum, yep, right? And then you can take it out in a secret, privacy-preserving stable token. So it's just like really, really cool stuff. And it's exciting. But yeah, it's just like super unique use cases. So I'll just say, like, if you haven't like looked into any of this stuff, like definitely feel free to reach out to us. And if you're building something, then you should definitely be thinking about like, how do we make this cross chain? Because I think you can like totally be the underdog and like take out some of these bigger Ethereum players.
100%.
Love underdogs.
You gotta love the underdog story. I guess I don't know if this is like a full alpha leak, but we are integrating Axelar into our UI UX bridging experience. That's also tied to IBC. So we're super pumped to be leveraging Axelar's API, and I think we'll be one of the first in the Cosmos, not the first, but like definitely on the front end of the pack of adopting Axelar. But thank you, Jake. Be sure to follow Axelar on Twitter. Be sure to subscribe to the channel here. And Jake, thank you for carving time out of your day to hop on and spread the vision of Axelar.
Yeah, that was awesome. Thanks for having me, guys.
100%. Have a good one, Jake.
All right. See ya.